Hi there, and welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, your relationship, wellness, and safety podcast. This is the premiere episode, so get excited about that. My name is Claudia King, and I will be your host. What I want to do with this episode is talk to you a little bit about my personal story, which will tell you why I'm so passionate about relationships. I want to tell you how this podcast came to be and what you can expect each and every week. So first off, though, I want to give a shout out to my amazing sister-in-law, Laura, who actually drew and painted this photo behind me. That's of me and my husband, Lee. So Laura, amazing job. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Claudia King, and I am a relationship, wellness, and safety expert. I currently work at Summit Advocates, where we support domestic violence survivors, along with survivors of sexual assault, trafficking, and stalking. We provide all kinds of different services, including shelter, advocacy, legal advocacy, therapy, support groups, pretty much you name it. We try to help people out in our community with that if they are survivors and trying to move on to that path of wellness. This job has been just amazing for me, and I'm so grateful to be there, and it brought me to you, so hopefully you're grateful as well. So, my background. Several years ago, way more than I'd like to admit, I guess, I was actually a police officer in North Carolina at a fairly large department, and we were so busy, I would go from call to call to call, and what I remember is so many of my calls, quite a large percentage, at least one or two a day, were domestic violence related. So often I would go to the home of a victim who had just been assaulted. Maybe the abuser was there, maybe he or she was gone already, but I spent a lot of time with the victims in that particular circumstance. And it really was so sad for me because I would see these people, and I may use women because that was the majority of the victims I dealt with, but there were definitely men as well. But I would sit with these women, and they would tell me these heartbreaking stories about themselves. I remember one woman who had shot herself in the stomach because she didn't want to be with her abuser anymore. And thinking about taking her own life was easier for her than thinking about leaving her abuser. So it was really profound, and it was a struggle for me. And I remember leaving a lot of those calls angry. And I was angry because these women didn't want more for themselves. They didn't think they were good enough to get away. They didn't even consider their children or the rest of their family in their struggle. They just continued to stay because they loved him, or because, well, I can't get anything better. I know I'm worthless, and so what else can I do? Where am I going to go? What is out there for me? Nothing better than this. Or when things are good, they're really good, and I just live for those times. So I would go home really frustrated, and I would never show that frustration to the victims when I was dealing with them, but I definitely would when I left, to myself and to my friends and my coworkers. I would express how angering it was and how disappointing it was that these people didn't want more for themselves and just continued in this cycle of violence and disruption of their lives. But I had a secret. And I think that secret is actually why I was so angry with these women. Because I wasn't really angry with them. I was angry with myself. Because when I would go home at night, I was the victim in a domestic abuse relationship. And I felt all those same emotions that these women were sharing with me. And my anger at them and my frustration with them for not wanting to get away or not feeling worth getting away, It was really a projection of how I felt about myself. And I realize that now, but at the time, I just couldn't see it for myself. And so now that gives me more compassion for the victims. It gives me more compassion for what they're going through and what they're feeling, because I myself couldn't admit it. I myself kept dealing with it day in and day out. So now I understand, and I'm just grateful that I came through to this place where I can now be somebody that has that compassion to help others. So the relationship that I was in was all forms of abuse. Firstly, isolation. He kept me from my family and my friends. And when I was able to see them, I remember how often they would comment on how I just wasn't myself, how my personality had changed, how I wasn't that same confident, bubbly, extroverted person that I had been just years before. And I always blew it off. And I even would get angry with them, and I would say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. I'm the same person. Of course, looking back, I wasn't the same person. I was a shell of who I used to be. And I was really disappointed in myself, because my mom had always taught me to be a strong, independent woman. And not somebody that didn't need other people, but somebody that wasn't controlled by other people. And here I was in that very controlling situation that I knew wasn't good, but I was in denial. And I'd put those blinders on, because I also dealt with emotional abuse. And, my abuser would tell me how I wasn't worth it, how I was stupid, I wasn't pretty, I wasn't good enough for anybody else. I was so lucky just to have him, and I should be so grateful and so thankful that he would put up with me. And even if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, that's crazy, I would never fall for that. I'm pretty sure I said that too. And I'm not saying everyone would fall for that, but when you hear it every single day, it really does become your reality, and it becomes your true north and what you really believe about yourself. And so then when your abuser is nice to you, you're grateful for that time. You're grateful for those moments where the abuser shows you love and compassion. And that's exactly how I was. I was grateful for those moments. My abuser also was financially abusive towards me. He would make me pay for certain things, and he would pay for certain things, except he wasn't really paying for them. So one example is we bought a car from his stepdad, and he convinced me at the time to put the car in his name, because it was his stepdad selling it to us, and so it should just be in his name. And of course, I went along with it, because what's the big deal? I'll tell you about the big deal shortly. But so our financial arrangement on that was that I would pay our rent and he would make the car payment. Well, I diligently paid our rent every month, and then come to find out he wasn't making the car payment because it was his stepdad. And I guess his stepdad let it slide. But I was financially struggling, paying for all these things, only to find out that he wasn't really paying for anything. So that was very, very frustrating and very, very difficult. I don't really have to talk about physical abuse, because we all know what that is. But, it's obviously the most common form of abuse, but it's not the only form of abuse. And that's why I talked about the other abuse that I suffered prior to physical, because I believe that emotional abuse, isolation, financial abuse, it is all equally, if not more damaging as a form of abuse than physical. So that's my personal feeling, but it's all a struggle to deal with. And that's what I was dealing with every single day. So I finally decided that I wanted to leave. But I was so broken, I can say now. I was so broken that I needed external validation. I needed a complete, anonymous, bipartisan individual to tell me that I was making the right decision and that I was doing the right thing. So I went to a therapist, and I told her what was going on and what I was thinking and feeling. And of course, she agreed with me. I was in a space that was not healthy. I was in a space that was never going to change for the better. And I needed to get out if I wanted to ever be happy and healthy. So I started making plans, and it was not an immediate go home and pack a bag. It took me a few weeks, maybe a month or two, to find a place to live and to get everything situated. Because I had to lie to him, and I told him that I was house hunting for a rental for us to move in together. And in my mind, though, I knew that this was going to be my safety zone. This was going to be the place for me to get away and finally start my life over in a healthier way. So I did, finally find somewhere, and I was able to move in and then break to him that we were not going to be together anymore. And it was one of the most difficult and scary things that I've ever had to do, because I knew what he would do when he got angry with me. So he didn't really disappoint, to be honest with you. The first thing he did was try to control me and coerce me with an engagement ring. So he, attempted the love angle first. So he presents me with this diamond that he was just about to go get mounted into a ring for me. And when that didn't work, he turned into the angry person. And one day when I was at work, he came and got my car, my only mode of transportation. Because remember, it was only in his name. So even though it was for me, and I had technically been paying for it because I paid the rent every month, that was my part of the deal, it was legally his vehicle. And he came and got it to try to again control me into thinking, well, I have no car now. Oh, I guess I have to go back. Well, luckily, I have amazing parents who were able to help me out in that situation and help me with the basics that I needed to keep going. So I consider myself a success story because I was able to get out. But I think I said earlier, how long ago that was. And looking back now, that was about 17, 18 years ago. Really long time ago. But, there's still things that cause me trauma from that relationship. And I joke about it sometimes, but it's very real. And one of those examples that sounds kind of funny is vacuuming. I hate vacuuming. Not because I don't like to clean. I actually enjoy things being very clean and neat and organized. But when I was with my abuser, he was very particular and controlling about everything. And one of those big things was vacuuming. And you had to have the lines just so in the carpet or it was not acceptable. And once I got away from there, I literally never wanted to vacuum again. So if you see me vacuuming, it's a pretty important situation. I will do it as needed, but I do try to get other people to help out with that. And if I come over to your house and you have just vacuumed and you have the nice little lines, I probably am going to come through and scuff them up. So just be forewarned about that. So while that's kind of a funny story, it just goes to show that the trauma that we suffer in an abusive relationship can take a really long time to go away, or it may never go away. I may always hate vacuuming, and I may always connect it back with that person that terrorized me, but I don't have to let it control me. And I think that is what is most important to learn if you are moving through to getting out of an unhealthy relationship, that you may never let go of every single trauma, but you can put it in a different place and not let it be the control over your life. So that's a little bit of my story, and that's why I'm so passionate about domestic abuse and domestic violence and making sure that victims have a voice, and not only have a voice, but have the strength to use that voice. Because if you don't have the strength and the empowerment, then you're just never going to get out of that relationship. So coming to the job that I have now, working with survivors, has just been life-changing for me, because it's shown me that telling my story can serve to help others. And even though it's really embarrassing, and I don't want to say that I'm ashamed, because that's the stigma that we've got to get away from, is feeling shame for what we've been through. I didn't do anything but stay. I'm not the cause of what happened to me. So I'm embarrassed to tell the story, but if it will help somebody else, then I want to provide that opportunity to let people know that you're not alone. And literally anyone, even the person with the gun and the badge, can be that person at home suffering just like somebody else. So why did I decide to do this podcast? Well, back in October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I had the opportunity to appear on another podcast called Spear Talk. And we did an episode specifically about domestic violence and COVID, and how much domestic violence had increased during people being locked down. And we also talked about different strategies that people can use if they know somebody that is in a domestic abuse relationship, or if they suspect a friend or family member might be. So after I did that podcast, I was so uplifted and so excited that I had that opportunity to spend an hour sharing with the audience about all these things domestic violence. And I thought, well, if I can do that for an hour, what if I did that every single week? And right about that time, John, the host of Spear Talk, reached out to me, and he asked me if I could design the perfect podcast for myself, what would it be? So I hurriedly started writing away, because I didn't want to make him wait very long to get my answer. And while I started writing about domestic violence and unhealthy relationships, I realized that more than romantic relationships can be healthy or unhealthy, our friendships can be toxic or can be cultivated into healthier relationships. Our family relationships, some of those can be extremely toxic. And what do we do to try to strengthen family relationships? Or what do we do if we have a toxic familial relationship? And I realized that my passion isn't just about romantic relationships and domestic abuse. It's about healthy relationships, happy relationships, relationships where everybody involved feels empowered and good about the relationship that they're in. So I sent John that information about making a podcast that has to do with all different kinds of relationships and really diving into how to cultivate relationships, what makes them good, what makes them bad, what are red flags to look out for, what do we do when we need to get out of an unhealthy situation, and what do we do to make a healthy situation even better and even stronger. Well, lucky for me, John was 100% on board, and he has been an amazing mentor and guide to help me get this podcast started. And just a little sneak peek, he might be my first guest because he has some pretty interesting relationship advice of his own to share. So I'm really excited about that. But what I decided overall for this podcast is that I want to talk about all things relationship and how to make sure that they're healthy and well, and how to get out of the ones that aren't, or how to improve them if it's a situation that can be improved. So when it comes to friendships, well, friendships are really important. So we're going to talk about the importance of friendship, the struggles that you can have with friendships, particularly if they're long distance, common misconceptions about abuse when it comes to friendships. I like to call them energy vampires, which can be friends or family, and then how to disengage from those energy vampires when they do appear. Things like how to make new friends. I've had people tell me that, hey, now that I'm not in college and I'm not really in the bar scene, I don't know where to make friends. So we're going to talk about that. Family relationships. Well, we all have that crazy uncle, right? But sometimes it's not just a funny story. There can be real toxicity involved in familial relationships. So we're going to talk about that. How to recognize it, what to do about it. Can you cut off family members, or are you obligated to stay because they're blood? We're going to get into all of that. The common theme of this podcast is that you are worth it. Every single one of us is worth healthy, happy relationships and overall happiness in our lives. And I want to make sure that I do whatever I can to help you find that relationship with yourself first so that you can have healthy relationships with others. As you can tell by the name of the podcast, it's about being strong enough. And you may be asking, well, strong enough for what? Well, for whatever you need to be healthy and happy, because I can't determine what your success is. Only you can decide that for yourself. And if I try to tell you that you have to do A, B, or C to be happy and healthy, well, that's not going to do either of us any good. I'm here to guide you, and I'm here to help you figure out what is success for you in any and all of your relationships. And how do you realize and know that you're strong enough to do the things that you have to do to get there? So that is really my goal. I want to make sure that I educate and empower you and the guest. So every time a guest comes on here, I want them to feel empowered and confident and stronger because they had the opportunity to tell their story. They had the opportunity to come and share with others what they struggled with or what has brought them success and happiness. And I want them to feel that empowerment of their own by having the opportunity to share with others. And of course, I want you to feel all of that as well. You know, you may not identify with the specific situation of each individual guest, but my hope is that there's something in there, in their story, in their path, in their journey that connects with your heart and with your soul and gives you something to work on or something to do to better your own path. I'm really excited about our first few guests, and I want to give you a little bit of information about those so that you can come back next week and the week after and hear what these have to say. So our first guest, I did give you a little hint earlier, is going to be my wonderful friend John, who travels quite a bit for his work and is in a very successful long-distance relationship. So we're going to talk a little bit about how he maintains that successful relationship long distance, as well as how COVID has affected his relationship. And maybe it's been a little bit less since he and his significant other kind of already have had that long distance success going. So we're going to talk about that. I have another upcoming guest who is going to share an amazing story with you about spending 3 decades in a domestic violent relationship and how she finally decided that it was time to get out of that relationship, all the struggles that she went through to do that, and then where she's at now and what lessons she's learned and how she's feeling about herself and her life and her relationships now. I have another amazing guest coming that's going to talk to you about a long-term childhood friendship, 5 decades of friendship almost, that just ended last year. And this guest is confused and hurt and wants closure because she doesn't entirely understand why this friendship ended. So we're going to really dive into the trauma and the pain that can come from friendships ending, because it is a very real situation. So again, I want to make sure that I provide you courage, strength, through the stories of others. I want you to take something away that is beneficial to you, and I want you to share with me what those things are every single week. So that's a little bit about me. That's my story. And I just want you to know that's the first time I've ever fully shared it. I did share a little bit of my story when I was on John's podcast in October. But this is the first time that I've really kind of let most all of the details out. And it feels good. I have to tell you, it does feel really nice to be able to share this with you, and it feels healing for me. So thank you for letting me do that. But yeah, so that's about me. That's why I'm so passionate about this podcast. I'm so passionate about relationships. I know that the health of those around us, the mental and emotional health of our relationships, really can be a huge factor in our own happiness and our own health. And I want to help you cultivate that happiness, cultivate that strength, and make sure that you have the healthiest, happiest relationships that you absolutely can have. So, thank you so much for your time today. I hope that I will see you again next week. Same time, same place. Every Thursday, we will be launching on YouTube, on the Spear Talk channel, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. So until next week, please stay strong enough and know you are worth it.